Hello everyone, my name is Chris Wetherington. In this training video, I will be discussing violence in the workplace. The topics I will discuss include my training objectives and the different types of violence in the workplace. While describing the different types of violence in the workplace, I will give examples of what employers can do to limit that type of violence. I will then talk about how this training would meet OSHA standards and how this training would add value to a company. After watching this video, I would like people to know the 4 types of violence that occur at the workplace, what each type means, and several examples of what can be done to limit that violence. I also want people to know what OSHA standards this training meets and what it could add to their company. The first type of violence in the workplace I will discuss is violence by a stranger. This involves verbal threats, threatening behavior, or physical assault by someone that has no business relationship to that workplace. An example of this would be when someone robs a store. Some way to limit this type of violence would be by seeing if there's a need for more cameras and by posting signs letting people know that limited cash is kept on hand. Another would be to ensure that doors are locked after hours and that people that need to be there are the only ones who can gain access. Also, escorting staff to their cars or other means of transportation will also limit violence by a stranger. These precautions could save lives and property because strangers can cause problems at any time. The second type of violence is by a customer or a client. This involves verbal threats, threatening behavior, or physical assault by someone who is at the business to receive a service or is a client. An example would be when someone causes harm to an employee of a wireless store for a problem with their bill. Some ways to limit this type of violence would be assess how often and how extreme the situations are that lead to the violence. Also, train your staff on how to safely handle threatening customers and install alarms or panic buttons to warn someone or to get assistance. Just like with violence by strangers, violence for a customer or a client can happen at any time, and being prepared is very important. The third type of violence is done by a coworker. It involves verbal threats, threatening behavior, or physical assault by someone who is connected to that workplace by their job. An example of this type of violence would be if a manager harmed an assistant manager, or vice versa. A few ways to limit this type of violence is by seeing how well your employees know the anti-violence policy and determine how well your employees are trained to know warning signs of violence. Also, you can look at your disciplinary and discharge procedures to see if there needs to be a change to make it fair for everyone. The last suggestion is very important because you do not want to fire or discipline someone in such a way that they want to get revenge. The fourth and final type of violence is violence by personal relations. This involves verbal threats, threatening behavior, or physical assault in the workplace by a spouse, friend, lover, or just an acquaintance. A couple of ways you can limit this type of violence is by assessing the access to the work area by non-employees and determine the rate and severity of employee-reported threats which may lead to violence. Also, train your employees to get police involved to remove personal relations from the workplace. Now we'll discuss how this training meets OSHA standards. While OSHA does not have a specific standard on violence in the workplace, employers are still required to keep them safe from any harm. The General Duty Clause of the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970 states that employers have to provide their employees a place of employment that is free from recognizable hazards that are causing or likely to cause death or serious harm to employees. This means that an employee is responsible for the employee's safety, whether it's from machinery, toxic fumes, or violence from people. They have to keep employees safe. Lastly, I will discuss how this training would benefit the company. Violence
Created using Powtoon.